this workshop. Now, I see somebody said, okay, Tinuade, you can't get it all at the beginning. All right, I feel like you've given the best answer to this. We're going to talk a little bit more about why later on. But thank you for that. I love how everyone's just jumping in and participating. If we could give grades, I would give you all an A+, especially Viba, who just gets right in there. Okay, so over to you, DG, to talk about the role of self-evaluation in quality assurance.
Sorry, can you see me? I got bumped out for a few moments there. Okay, so we started this week's set of workshops the other day with the school development plan. And now we are here with self-evaluation. We want to make sure that we have a standards-based approach to quality assurance, and it's a process, right? And we discussed then, and we'll discuss again today, how these four main components work together. So we started off with the school development plan. We talked about the vision, mission of the school, how the school can use SMART goals to ensure that the goals that they've set for themselves are what's the word? That the goals that they've set for themselves are reflective of the actual needs of the school, and that they're not just engaging, but they're moving the school forward. Okay, so we also don't want to set goals that are too low. We want goals that are just right and allow the school to stretch just a bit. So now we've moved on from that to the self-evaluation process. Okay, this is the next slide. So the school development planning workshop is available on our YouTube. I'm not sure if we've uploaded it onto Lagos Learns Together, but it will be soon if it's not there already. So the deck is there. The tools that you need to actually work with your school on creating a school development plan is there also, as will be all the workshops that we go through. So essentially, not just is this recording available there, but we are expecting and hoping that you're able to decipher this information and you're able to work with your schools, your teachers, your school leaders, in the case of quality assurance officers, to get this training done. So all the tools will be available or are available on LagosLearnsTogether.com. Okay, so the self-evaluation cycle. The first thing we want to do is we want to figure out, where are we? Okay, review where are we and how we're doing against the standards that have been set. We have the standards that are stipulated within the quality assurance handbook, right? There are standards for teaching and learning. There are standards for all the 7 components. So how are we doing in each of those components, those standards? So review, honestly, review that. The second one, and the one that I really like the most, is reflect. I find that oftentimes we go from review to reacting. So this is where we are, this is where we want to be. But are we really able to think about how well we should be doing, given our resources, given the previous benchmarks we've been able to meet, given the benchmarks we want to continuously meet? Remember that these benchmarks that we have are minimum standards, right? They're minimum standards, and schools are expected to try to get to the minimum standards, as well as going above and beyond. Good enough. For those of you that were present at the workshop we did on Tuesday, we were able to show you a table where we were able to break down what effective teaching and learning, for instance, looks like in the different categories of schools. Oftentimes, there's a misconception that I'm a great school, I have all these wonderful infrastructures in place, so I'm automatically wonderful. I mean, those things are helpful, but it's not a done deal until you're able to judge yourself according to those components one by one. So reflect upon how well you actually should be doing. Then react. What do we need to improve? And to what extent do we need to improve each of the different components? Another thing we talked about the other day is that sometimes you need to prioritize, right? And that comes about with the SMART goals. You need to prioritize what you're tangibly able to do within a set time frame. So what do we need to do to improve? Okay, and that is in the short term, medium term, long term, and what type of resources, manpower do we need to be able to do that? Okay, so we want to be able to review where we are against standards. We want to be able to reflect and have an honest conversation with ourselves about what we should be doing and why we are where we are. Okay, then we want to be able to react and move forward, okay, as to what our plan is and how we will get better. Okay, so we can move on to the next. Okay. So, and okay. Oops, no, go ahead, sorry.
I skipped something. So
hopefully
you didn't look at that slide. No, this was my fault. I was meant to jump in here. Hopefully you didn't look at that next slide that quickly appeared. One thing, if your hand is raised, we're going to ask you just to put your questions into the chat. It would be really, really hard for us to do this workshop in an hour and a half if we start for questions. Having said that, we are going to have 2 points where we're going to ask you to jump in and share. And then I believe Mrs. Ashobo, if she's with us, we'll call on people. But we'd like you in the chat. What do you think are the characteristics of effective self-evaluation? You know, what does a self-evaluation need to be? Does it need to be honest, right? Of course, we can all agree it should be an honest review. But what else? What would you pop into the chat to say this is a characteristic of a good self-evaluation process?
How many minutes are we going to give them for this?
Oh, good. Let's make it time bound. 2. This is a quickie.
Okay.
Okay, Helen, thank you. Must involve all team members. It should pass the psychometric test. Okay.
Okay, that's interesting.
That might be a heavy lift for some schools. What other characteristics? But Helen, thank you for highlighting that. So I guess that speaks to one of the things that we brought up earlier, right? It should be a relatively good reflection of the standard. Yes, it should speak to the standard. But I think Helen really drove home that initial point that when we asked in the true or false, is this the responsibility of the principal? It's a little bit of a yes and, right? Yes, at the end of the day, it is the responsibility of the principal, but we want it to be distributed. Purpose, selecting the right tool. Okay, right. What tools are you using and how are you using them in the school? All right, these are great responses. We love them. You can keep them coming. But we're going to pop on to the next slide, which I believe is one of yours, DG.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to talk through this. Okay, so we're going to talk through what we recommend for the self-evaluation process. And there are steps that are here. Sorry, I have to maximize this a bit here. So an effective self-evaluation is collaborative. Someone mentioned in the chat in answering some of those questions that is, carrying along the school team, right? So although we look at the principal, the school leader as the owner, it is something that cannot be done in unison, right? So it must be collaborative. The leaders, the board, the staff are all engaged in one way or another. Okay, I think it's always a very good idea for the leadership of the school to be able to intentionally delegate work streams along with those SMART goals so that everyone has a role to play, and then they're bound by time, and they're bound by the responsibilities they need to put up for that. Okay, it's a great way to make everyone accountable also. Okay, so an effective self-evaluation is collaborative in nature. Another thing that it is evidence-based, right? So we are not just going to say our teaching and learning is highly effective because it just is. No, we need evidence of that. Okay, so what type of documentation are we using? Student learning outcomes, so student assessment, how are the students doing? So in comparison to how the students started off in the school year to maybe the end of the term, what type of jump or leap have students made, especially our maybe low performing students? How much have they moved forward? How have we moved forward when it comes to, you know, child safeguarding and protection? Okay, so we need evidence. We need evidence to show this. Has the school signed off and created their own child protection policy? Is it visible in the school, in the classrooms? Have the school leaders taken advantage or taken the mandated courses by government, like the school reopening course? Is there evidence of that? The certificates of the teachers, right? So it must be evidence-based. Okay, and that is really important. Sometimes we underscore the importance of evidence, or we may not even think we have evidence, but there's evidence all around. Okay, even in our manual processes, even things that don't seem fancy, even if it's a log book, exercise book that the teacher has to show that they have been contacting teacher families, right? So even if it's a log book, even if it's files for each student, that's all evidence. Okay, I'm really laying heavy on the evidence because oftentimes that's really what is missing. Okay, an effective self-evaluation is accurate. Okay, it's accurate. So it's increasingly aligned to the evaluator feedback. Okay, so maybe when we start, there may be a bit of a gap as we try to understand the standards and we're held more accountable. But as we progressively get better, as the school has taken on the feedback of the evaluator, we notice that they have taken on this feedback and they have proffered solution. They've actually done some work, which is why the evaluator role is so important, right? Because how are schools able to self-evaluate themselves if they don't even know what the evaluator is saying, what the external evaluator is saying? So that can be in terms of the evaluation report. It could be in terms of the oral feedback, or whatever feedback the evaluator chooses to use should be used for the schools to be able to move progressively, get better. And then we noticed that, for instance, in year 2019, maybe there was a 5-point differentiation between what OEQE said and what the school self-assess evaluation says. But maybe in year 2021, they're actually the same. Okay, so it must be accurate. The last one, it must be actionable. Okay, actionable. All right, this serves as the basis for the annual school development plan, right? So as a result of this school self-evaluation, we have been able to derive from it actual action points, goals that are SMART. Okay, we have SMART goals here that the school is able to actually implement. So I really want you to notice how everything actually works together, right? So if you have a school self-evaluation and you're using the school development plan of the previous year, you actually have those action points right there to get you to the point where the school has actually improved, and you're able to look at yourself against that plan to see how you've been able to improve. So everything actually works together. Next slide.
Well, that's me talking on mute. Here we go. So we would love to hear from you now. And I think we would have time to call on one or maybe two participants to share what you do when you're conducting a self-evaluation. So if you'd like to share, I'd ask you to raise your hand. And maybe, do we have Mrs. Ashobu here?
Yes, good morning. I'm here, ma'am.
Good morning, Mrs. Ashobu.
Good
Would
morning,
you
ma'am.
like to, good morning. Would you like to call on someone to share how they do their self-evaluation?
Okay. I would like to call Joseph Shodipo, please. I think I saw his hand raised up. Joseph Shodipo, can you help me? Let me unmute him.
Uh-oh. Is this the case of the missing participants where they can just leave?
Okay, if Joseph
call
Shodipo is not around, what about Akin Abbas Elizabeth? Akin Abbas Elizabeth? Hamed Sahad, are you there? Hamed Sahad. Okay.
I think we need to start offering some gifts, some goodies.
Ooh, I like goodies.
Maybe we need to start sending some goodies. But this is also, I mentioned this the other day too. So as we are going through this workshop, keep in mind that these are some of the issues you may face when you're facilitating these trainings, these workshops with your participants, right? So it's always a good time to sort of reflect upon how you can ensure that there's better engagement as you go through your session, because we know that as we're going through this workshop, it's not just for the school leaders and for the OEQA evaluators. What we really want to do is we want you to feel empowered to give such workshops at the school-based level or the teacher-based level. So it's good to really think about that even if we that are online are feeling shy sometimes to participate, you may face that with your teachers also. So no worries, just keep forging ahead.
I did notice we've had two people raise their hands since then, Mr. Ahmed Saad and Ms. Elizabeth Ogunrinola. So Mrs. Ashobu, if you'd like to try calling on one of them, perhaps.
I don't think they're online now. Maybe I can call Mr. Mobile. Hello, Mr. Mobile.
Okay, well, I think what we'll do then in this case, and thank you, Mrs. Ashobu, and thank you, DG, for highlighting that. For sure, one of the challenges when you're doing an online workshop is participation. And for us, it's always a little bit of a learning curve, right? If you were in the last workshop, we used a tool called Menti. And in our first go with Menti, I think we had maybe 8 or 9 participants, but by the third time we did it, we had 26, which was great. We find in general, chat might be a more comfortable space. So we always want to balance that, sticking to people's comfort zones, because that gives you the good participation, but also introducing new tools, or as we like to say, breaking the internet from time to time. Oh, Mr. Owombiowo has asked to be unmuted.
Okay, maybe that was the issue. Maybe some people were muted.
And
another thing I wanted
allowed to talk. Oh, there we go.
Okay, let's go ahead.
Wait, did I?
Yes, he's
yes,
fine.
He should be able to.
Hello, ma.
Hello, sir.
Hello, sir.
Good morning. I want to say that conducting self-evaluation, just like you rightly said, we would have probably look at some rubrics, possibly the areas that possibly the school, especially when we talk about the vision of that particular school, and at the same time look at the areas that the school has actually been doing well in the past, and then be able to see how they can improve on what they have been able to do so far. So we look at, in order to actually assess a school self-evaluation, the school must have already known the areas of its strength and as well as the weaknesses. So in the rubrics that we have, especially the instruments, we have some items that we actually look at, especially in line with our guides. And these are the guides that we use in teaching the school on how to evaluate itself. For instance, we talk about achievement and standards. What are those things that the school need to actually see and probably use in order to assess itself in that particular area? We teach schools on that too. Then we now look at the balancing. That is, if the school actually said that it's a good school, how far has it been able to give a progressive teaching and learning in that particular school? We look at that. Then what are the evidences? The evidences in terms of the results, external results of that particular school, like my director general has said, we need evidence so much in order probably to help us, in order to ascertain the authenticity of whatever the school is talking about. So without these variables, it might be difficult for us actually in order to guide the school in how to go about it. So that is
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay. Can we call
That
on?
was very thorough. That was, I wanted to thank Mr. Awombi. You can tell he's such an expert when it comes to whole school evaluation. And I just wanted to also mention that with evidence, what we've done with the supplement is we've been able to now expand what those evidences should be like, right? Because we also don't want to be very fixed in our mindset of what type of evidence is meeting a certain benchmark, right? So as evaluators, as school leaders, we need to be able to be somewhat flexible in thinking through what evidence, how the evidence presented to us is actually showing what it's supposed to show. Okay, so I know that teachers go through this all the time with students. You have that one student that's just like, when you are asking the true or false, and someone said it depends, right? In a traditional sense, someone will say it's true or false. That's it. But if we're able to be flexible and really being reflective, right? Okay, it depends. Can you dig deeper and explain how it depends? Then we can dig deeper and really get to the center of what the school is actually trying to do. Please go ahead.
Wonderful, thank you. Mrs. Chauveau, I think we can call on one more person just to make sure that we keep things moving. So one more.
Can we have Mr. Ijiwumi, please? The CD District 4. Mr. Ijiwumi.
Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, ma'am. So in having the self-evaluation, as a school, what the school needs to do is just to have, majorly, to have inputs from all the departments. All the departments must be equipped enough to be able to gather inputs and then bring the inputs forward for all the stakeholders to deliberate upon. So if they are able to do this, definitely they will be able to have a good self-evaluation. Ordinarily, we know that they have to have all the semantics, all the 7 aspects of evaluation. They must have it in being able to gather the inputs together. So once they have the knowledge of all these as departments in the school, we have different the science department, the arts department, the commercial departments with the HODs and the teachers. They just have to come together, gather the inputs together, look at the aspects, the key areas they need to evaluate, and then with the inputs coming from there, they can now bring all the stakeholders together and deliberate on it in order to have a very good self-evaluation for the school. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Miss
Yes.
Christine, can we have?
Thank you so much, sir.
And Mrs. Ashobo? Mrs. Ashobo?
Hello, sorry, ma'am. I said, can we have one more person?
Oh, sure. One more, but then we have to move on, okay?
Okay, ma'am. Okay, can we have Mr. Sada? Are you there? Hello? If Mr. Sada is not coming up, I saw someone writing on the chat, Mrs. Abimbola Oluwaseyi. Can you please unmute Ms. Abimbola Oluwaseyi?
It could be that sometimes people have issues unmuting themselves. Okay, there we go.
Good morning, my DG.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good
Morning,
morning,
ma'am.
all. Yeah,
Morning, ma'am.
I have here steps to self-evaluation. Number one, there's need to set goals. What you want to achieve. Number two, they need to have a platform, the baseline, how to kick off. Hello?
Yes.
Okay. And of course, as you are starting, you need to have evidence, records to show the changes that are taking place in the course of meeting the goals. And if there are data, information, there's a way you interpret the data. And of course, we need to draw actions. What are the actions taken in achieving the evaluation? Then after that, you need to reset and start again on where you can improve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Well done, ma. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I love hearing all of you talk about the process that you go through for self-evaluation, because it really is honestly the most important part of this evaluation process. And I know I'm on with the OEQA, and they might say, understandably, no, it's the external evaluation. But at the end of the day, change kind of comes from within. And so as much as somebody on the outside might tell you, do this or do that, it's that self-evaluation that enables you to create changes that are meaningful and long-lasting for the school. So we're going to just talk a little bit about some of the steps that we recommend, right? So step one is getting the facts, making sure you got the standards and you know what they are. There are two ways that you can do this. One is you can download the OEQA draft supplement from LagosLearnsTogether.com. I say draft because it's a living, working document, and we'll be adding more and more examples of effective, real evidence from your context as time goes on. Or sign up for the OEQA automation pilot when you're contacted by the OEQA office to do so, which is essentially a digital way of doing the self-evaluation, school development planning, and external evaluation. Step two is building your self-evaluation team. As you've all pointed out, self-evaluation is a team sport. You will work with your leaders, your board, your staff to engage in self-evaluation. Does that mean that everyone is equally involved? No. You may have some teachers who are stretched to the limit teaching, but you want to make sure that you're incorporating the right people to do the right things. So this is how we recommend doing this. You know that you have 3 core areas of standards, and then within that you have approximately 7 sort of substandards. Each of those standards / substandards, you know, whether it's looking at student achievement or it's looking at leadership, should have a lead from your school. Now, how that works is going to depend on the size of your school. Some schools have hundreds of children, then you have plenty of leaders to choose from. Other schools may have 100 students, and then you'll have fewer people to choose from in this process. But I want you to just take a moment on that paper that you have and just jot down, who do you think would be the leads for each of the standards? And in fact, what I'm going to do is just stop my share for a moment, and I'm going to pull up the school development planning workshop for a second to share the slide that has the standards. I want you to really take the time to do this right now. No one's going to hold you to what you put up here, but we want you to think in a way that's practical so that when you leave this workshop today, you can actually have something real and practical to share with your colleagues. So let me swap my share here. There we go. So take a moment to really do this. Jot down 1A, achievement and standards. Who on your team would look after achievement and standards? Learners' personal skills and participation. Who would be looking at that? Right? Achievement and standards are the what's the outcome? The personal skills and participation to an extent is the how. How are you getting there? And then think through the elements of standard 2, or sorry, the substandards. 2A, the quality of teaching and learning. Now, there's a pretty good chance that that's going to be the same person as achievement and standards. Unless you're a big school, at a big school, you might have a data-oriented person looking at achievement and standards, and somebody who's more pedagogically oriented looking at teaching and learning. But if you're a small school, it may be the same person on both of those. The quality of curriculum and other activities. Who in your school would oversee that? At a small school, it may again be the same person who's looking at achievement and standards and the quality of teaching and learning. At a large school, you may have a curriculum specialist who oversees this. The quality of care, guidance, and safety. Most likely, that's going to be your designated safeguarding lead. The quality of the learning environment. Who would oversee that? The learning environment involves so much, right? It's how are you using the resources that you have, whatever they might be, to support learning? How are you improving the learning environment year on year for students? And then finally, this is an interesting one, the effectiveness of leadership and management. If you're delegating the self-evaluation, who takes that? Is it the principal? Maybe, but it could also be another member of the senior leadership team. So just take a moment to write down some of the names. Who would you think of? Maybe you already have people who are leading on each of these, but maybe you don't. Or maybe you're thinking about it in new ways. Certainly, COVID-19, school closures, digitization, new issues in safeguarding have definitely shifted the way we think about these things. The person who oversees teaching and learning or achievement and standards might be somebody who's a little more digital or needs to be a little more digital than they would have needed to be several years ago.
Another thing I actually thank you for that, Christine. In thinking through effectiveness of leadership and management, right? Since we've said that principals and school leaders are really taking the lead or the owner of the school self-evaluation, how do we then grade ourselves, right? So it's it's interesting and it's also important that school owners, along with their leadership team, the principals, have evidences that speak to this. And although we have some evidence that's that we will accept, it's helpful to even think outside of the box sometimes, right? So I know that there are some schools that even use student surveys, and where they even ask the teachers about questions about their leadership. So how comfortable are you going to your principal with a problem or sharing innovative ideas? So there are different ways in which you can get that. But I think that it's also important to make sure that it's objective and it is domiciled with a person or a team that's able to have that sense of objectivity, right? Because the more we lean toward the truth, the further we're gonna go, right? We cannot be lying to ourselves about how well we are not doing. We get better only when we have honest feedback. So sometimes it may be a bit uncomfortable as a leader to get feedback, but the more we are comfortable with the uncomfortable, the further we're able to go.
Yeah, one thing I always say about that feedback for leadership is those opinions are out there, whether you get them or not through a survey. So you may as well know what they are. I'm going to show, actually, I'm skipping ahead a little bit here, but just to underscore the DG's point. When we did the
supplements
school development planning workshop, we asked the participants to rate their proficiency with each of the standards, and just take a look at what came up as number one, call full of school leaders. Now, that may be true, right? That the effectiveness of leadership and management is the strength of the school. But you always want to think a little bit, dig under the surface. What does that mean? What would it look like? What kind of evidence would you use to support that? So let me jump back here. All right. So then you want to delegate the substandards, right? I mean, achievement and standards, that's one whole category, but there are substandards within that. And you may have one person who's overseeing the collection of evidence and the self-evaluation rating for multiple substandards. And that can be delegated by essentially the standard lead. So if you are the standard lead for teaching and learning, you might complete the substandard evaluation, or you may delegate those in a big school down to middle leaders or heads of department. And this just gives you an example. Now, this is straight from the automation platform. There are already a few schools in Lagos State who are working with the OEQA on the implementation of this online platform to engage in the process. And as time goes on, more and more schools will be invited to do so. But you would then want to delegate within, say, standard 1.1, the quality of provision, the quality of teaching and learning, specific indicators or substandards. Lesson plans with clear learning outcomes are communicated clearly at the start of the lesson with suitable teaching strategies. And when learners understanding requires special attention, teachers are able to deviate from the plan. So who should be collecting the evidence for that? Clearly, somebody who has the opportunity to look at lesson plans, yes, but then also who's in lessons observing from time to time. And then finally, and this goes back to that first true or false that we asked, does self-evaluation happen once a year? No, self-evaluation is an ongoing process, but you want to make sure that you, as the school leader, set up a reasonable timeline for submission of judgments and the evidence that goes with the submission of judgments. And I would say my little hint for this is you want just enough time as a school leader to be reasonable, but not enough time so that your colleagues forget or get busy, right? typically from the time you delegate to the time you get that self-evaluation rating and some evidence shouldn't be more than about 2 or 3 weeks the first time you ask people to do it. Any more than that, people will typically delay until they just have 2 or 3 weeks left to do it anyway. Not out of not caring or wanting it to be fantastic, but just because schools are very, very busy places.
Yes,
So
I also
over to
wanted
you,
to,
DG.
to add to that, before we even move forward, this workshop is not to get rid of anything that's already in existence, right? We have federal government guidelines that we're using, and the quality of that federal government document is pretty good. What we've done as a state is we've just trying to dig deeper, right? So dig deeper as to what would make this thing more usable, what would actually drive impact. Yes, we can collect school self-evaluations as part of the process, as I believe Mr. Sada has stated here, notifying them ahead of time. Yes, all those things are still there. But to further ensure that everything we're doing is producing a fruit, everything that we're doing is moving the school from one level to the next, we must progressively get better at the different aspects of how we go about doing the process, right? Which is why we're not having a sort of checklist approach to the school self-evaluation. Have you done this? Check. Have you done this? Check. Have you done this? Check. Yes, that's still part of it. We want to dig deeper because we want the schools to be able to take ownership over their progress. Like Ms. Christine said earlier on, school self-evaluation is important because it's even an indicator to us as a state that the more accurate your school, not the school development plan, I meant the school self-evaluation. The more accurate that evaluation is, right, coupled with your development plan, everything is aligned, the more we know that you are able to progress. It's not magic, there's no, it's not magic. It is doable, right? There's a science to it, right? So the reason why we're here today and the reason why we've created this draft supplement, although we haven't shared it with everyone up until now, I've spoken to the Director of Quality Assurance about it, but the reason why we've created this is so that we're able to dig deeper at the end of the day. So I just wanted to mention that please don't fear. It's not like we're doing an entirely new process. That's not the case. We're just thinking through with our learners at the center, our schools at the center, right? How are they going to move from point A to B? Right? And recognizing that, yes, our role is to uphold standards, our role is to support, right? So how can we more effectively do this where we're moving away from the policing way of doing things, that we're moving more to the type of coaching that we want our schools to have. And we want in turn for the schools to also have this approach when working with their teachers and their school-based staff, okay? So step 4, schedule, time to review and to review the feedback based on evidence. Sorry, there's a bit of a grammatical issue there. So it's an ongoing process. Right? It's an ongoing process. It's not something that is just going to be a one-off, but there will be a set date as to when it is due when we're coming to your school for whole school evaluation, right? It's something we want you to do annually, but like any good student, right? You don't wait for the test before you start studying. You don't wait for the test, you dig in and you get progressively better. So by the time the exam comes, you've done it so many times, you can do it with your eyes closed, right? So we are really, focusing on the best practice the best practices that should be in place so that as at the time the school self-evaluation comes in, it is an actual a reflection, an accurate reflection of what is going on at the school. Okay, next slide.
Do you want me to jump in on this one?
Sure.
Okay, so this actually comes from the automation platform that the DG mentioned, right?
Oh, sorry,
we
Christine. I also want to mention something. I don't think I
Yes.
spoke enough about the automation platform.
Mm.
So the OAQA, Office of Education Quality Assurance, we have been working really hard to ensure that things are done more efficiently. And we are starting with our quality assurance processes. So what we're working toward, as Ms. Christine had mentioned, we have a few schools that we've chosen for as a part of the pilot phase, so we can, learn about what works, what doesn't work, what we need to, better do before everything is rolled out. Okay, we're learning some lessons now. Okay, but this automation is going to be in some ways replacing the manual process of doing things. We know that when you automate anything, right, it's only going to be as good, as effective as your manual processes. So in no way, shape, or form are we ridding ourselves of the manual way of doing things, but we are creating a platform where it will make it easier for schools to upload information, make it easier for schools to get feedback from the office, and make it easier for us as evaluators to get a more objective view of what is going on at the school-based level. So I just wanted to, talk to our people about that a bit, because many people may not really know what that means. So please go ahead.
Okay. So I think we want to talk about evidence for a little bit right now. We've been kind of discussing evidence in general, but I want to go with one of the standards, okay? The quality of the provision. And I'd like you to use the chat. So here we have the standard and then the indicator, right? The quality of the provision, quality of teaching and learning. And the indicator, lesson plans with clear learning outcomes are communicated clearly at the start of the lesson and with suitable teaching strategies. When learners' understanding requires special attention, teachers deviate from the plan. Now, let's take a moment. What would be forms of effective evidence for self-evaluation judgment, whatever that judgment might be? Good, acceptable, poor, whatever it might be. What would you see as effective forms of evidence? And take a moment to just share those in the chat. With this particular standard and indicator
are using the chat box for the feedback, I want you to really notice how packed that indicator is. I want you to notice how packed the indicator is and how each element, A through E, is helping us to more accurately judge this standard. I want you to look at even the indicator itself, the sentence, and look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how each one is working towards that standard 2.1. I want you to reflect upon that.
So what would you as a school leader want evidence to be? You've given this to a head of department. They've come back to you. Okay. They've said, I think we're good in this area. What kind of evidence would you want them to share? What would you want to be able to see? Please use the chat for this. Ooh,
I don't think we've gotten any feedback on that, have we?
we haven't, no.
Okay, are
Well,
there
I'm
any
s-
questions? Are there any questions we have about what's being asked of us?
Okay, so we've, Mr. Awam Biowo has said documentation, right? Good. What kind of documentation? What are some of the specific things you would want that head of department to show up in your office with? Or to WhatsApp to you, whatever it might be, however you're going to collect your evidence. Lesson plans, health and safety policies, etc. Great. Now, specifically for this indicator, lesson plans, right? What else? What else might go into that? And thank you, Tinuade. Based on the aspects, okay, but what? What do you want to see? What kinds of evidence? So yes, it should be directly linked to what you see in that standard and those indicators. We'll definitely agree with Tinuade's comment. Lesson plans for sure. What else? Ooh, Lagos ring. All right, folks. So please use the chat right now to share what you would want to see as forms of evidence. We're going to go more into evidence in a little bit. And finally, as you know, you'll use that self-evaluation to update or to draft your school development plan. I'm not going to discuss this slide in too much detail, but ultimately what you're looking to do is to embed that evidence collection, that monitoring and evaluation into your leader's annual, monthly, weekly, or even daily routine. But let's just go back to this question of evidence. And as the DG said, we've got 3 key issues in this standard. Lesson plans with clear learning outcomes, communicating
Shodipe
clearly.
Michael stated lesson plan and Lagos State scheme of work that they should align. Absolutely. Absolutely. That aligns directly with what is mentioned in the indicator. Lesson activities in the lesson plans. Okay. That's Oluyemisi Abiola Oyedele. Okay.
Awesome. So Tinuade, we're with you 100% on that. In addition to lesson plans, so that's the planning and that's great. But all of us who work in school leadership, we know what you see on a plan is sometimes what you see in the classroom. Sometimes what you see in the classroom is even better. Sometimes it's not quite as good as what's in the plan. So what other form of evidence might you use to see how this looks in the classroom? I'm trying to pull you along. What else might you use? So lesson plans.
Someone mentioned
also
clearly stated objectives and suitable teaching strategies. Absolutely. So lesson plans with clear learning outcomes communicated clearly. So if it's stated on the board, then children know when they come to the class that that is where they're supposed to look. So it's not just on the board and no one is using it. Okay. There has to be a system in place where students are not just aware that something is stated on the board, but that what is stated on the board will drive the expectation for that day. Because it's one thing to just have an outcome listed. It's another thing to actually have it in use when working directly with the stakeholders, being the students.
So let's tap in then to some specific ways of thinking about this evidence, right? Because it's completely normal to think about the quality of the lesson plan. And believe me, lesson planning is so important. You don't have a good lesson plan, you probably won't have a good lesson. No differentiation in the plan, you probably won't have differentiation in the lesson. But I want us to think broadly about how we can make visible different forms of evidence. And we talk about evidence in 3 buckets. Now, this is not from me, right? This is from David Perkins and from a specific research project called Leading Learning That Matters, Project Zero Perspectives, 2016. But Dr. Perkins talks about data you can count, data you can see, and data you can hear. How do you make all of that visible, though? Here are just some of the things that you could be looking for, okay? Internal and external student performance data. Now, that's not going to link directly to standard 1.1.2, but that's okay. Student, parent, and teacher surveys. Do students agree with the line, "My needs are met in a lesson"? Examples of student work. Do we find that the student work is clearly linked to the objectives? Do we find that the student work shows different ways of achieving the objectives for different types of learners? What about the exercise books, right? When we look through, and the Federal Quality Assurance Framework talks a lot about exercise books. When we look through the exercise books, do we see evidence that what's happening in the classroom links to objectives? Are different learners accommodated for? What about interviews? In the same way that an external evaluator might interview a student, you can also, when you're collecting your evidence, when your middle leaders are collecting their evidence, interview students or teachers. To a teacher, what do you do in a lesson when the children aren't being carried along? How do you adapt that lesson? Also, classroom observation notes. What do you see? Do you walk in and see the objectives on the board for the students to follow? Do you see students being provided with extra support if they need that? Now, I can say as a middle leader, yes, that's happening, but do I have that documented in classroom observation notes? Do you grade the classroom observations? You can use the same grading system that you find in the federal framework. How about meeting minutes? Has there been professional development on writing effective objectives? Do you have that documented in a meeting? All of these are great examples of effective evidence for that particular standard. And of course, you may also include schedules, professional development content, lesson plans, which we've all mentioned already, and much, much more. But this gives you a sense of some of the wide range of evidence. We might even look at, like, yes, you've gone into a classroom. There are students working in groups. You can take a picture of that. That becomes a form of evidence.
I also wanted to interject. I'm sorry if we could go back.
Oh, yeah, of course. Which
I
one?
don't
This
want
slide?
this list of evidence to be intimidating. It's not meant to be intimidating. It's not meant for things to be more difficult for you. No. 9 times out of 10, you have these things already. What this evidence, what this evidence process is supposed to do is to help you to capture these things as evidence. Many times, teachers talk to their students, find out what's going on at home. Informally, they may talk to them, they may talk to their family members. What we are saying now is that is evidence, okay? So how can you document or capture these different things that you are already doing? You are already doing most of these things. Most places that I go, I see they are doing it, but it has become so ingrained in you as to what you do naturally. You don't see the need to document because it's as natural as breathing air, right? It's as natural as breathing air, but we want to make sure that we are able to better document the good practices you're doing. Because believe it or not, regardless of the level your school is at, if you are considered a low-cost school, if you're considered a very expensive school, a low-cost school can be an exceptional school. And an expensive school can be a poor school. So it's not just based on where you are, you know, how much your tuition is and all of that. No. But we know that there's an opportunity. Number one, we as QA, we are better able to provide best practices and to share them. So for instance, if you're a low-cost school and you are doing something that is working, and when we first look at you, we may not really understand how is this low-cost school producing these things. But if you are able to capture those evidences, we can then share that with schools with similar dynamics and demographics and say, you know what, we actually have seen a school with your level of resources and this is what they're doing. Okay, so don't look at this list and say, QA has come with their list of all these things they want us to do. No, some of these things, yes, they may be different than what you normally do. Fine, right? But we have to grow. We're expecting our students to grow and to be lifelong learners. We also have to commit to be lifelong learners to be better in our field. Fine. But I want to really emphasize that what we have done is we've expanded this toolbox by actually putting a name and a line, interview notes. This interview may be done orally. So maybe interview notes, interview recordings, classroom observation notes. Not everything has to be perfectly typed, or it could be the notes that you're just handwriting in an exercise book. Okay, so I want you to also look at this with new eyes. Don't look at it as, they have come again. What else do they want us to do? No. Okay. This is to further expand our resource availability so that, number one, we can also learn. There are many things we may not even realize that you're doing and that we can learn so that we can help to scale it. Government can scale. So if there's a small school that's doing something, we can help to scale it across schools. So I just wanted to emphasize that.
Absolutely, DG. And, you know, we hope that the next time this workshop is done, we're not the facilitators, right? It's the schools that are the facilitators because
exactly.
You're the ones up close. Now, the other thing I would say is, as the DG was pointing out, this is not meant to be extra work, okay? One of my favorite expressions is don't try hard, try easy. Let's make this as simple as possible. If we go back to standard 2.1, quality of provision, and then we're looking at this line, lesson plans with clear learning outcomes, etc. Do not think for even a minute, promise me you will not walk away thinking you need all of these different forms of evidence. One form of evidence, two forms of evidence will do just fine. Absolutely just fine. What we want to do is let you know that there are other options. There are a lot of choices, and there are ways that you can capture things that might not always be obvious to somebody walking in. It's about letting you shine. So the last thing that we're going to talk about, and I'll turn this back over to the DG, is closing the SEF gap with OEQA. In the true or false, we asked, right, do you have to get this right the first time? And the DG has already alluded to this. The answer is no. This is a process. Your SEF may be here and OEQA may be there in terms of the way the school is seen, but in time you come closer together. So over to you, DG.
Thank you, Ms. Christine. So why does it even matter, right? Why does an accurate self-evaluation even matter? Isn't it just for me to just answer questions, right? we want to make sure that as you're going through this self-evaluation, you are getting better systematically, not based on the fact that you have one or two strong hands, not based on the fact that maybe presently as a proprietress or proprietor, you have a lot of free time on your hands now, not based on anything that can change. We want to make sure that there's a system in place, okay? There's a system in place that ensures that your self-evaluation is accurate, is objective, okay? Regardless if you like or you don't like your English teacher's face, you can acknowledge based on the evidence that person is doing a good job, right? And the evidence shows that. Okay. The second reason why that's important is to ensure that as quality assurance is focusing on the areas of improvement, we are able to better support you. And that will continuously shift. So maybe this year, there are things that we noticed in your school when we got there. Within the course of the year, you have your professional development plan, school self-evaluation, and you've been meeting, you've been crushing your goals. Excellent. By the time we come back, and we also notice that you've upped your game, we also have to think through how we can help you to go further. Remember, the standards are minimum standards. We don't want anyone to remain at the minimum standard. We know many people are struggling to get to those minimum standards, and we want to help them to get there. We also know that many people are at the minimum standard and we want to help them to reach higher. Think about a classroom where you have different types of learners. You won't say that you're just going to focus on the students that always just do well and leave those that are behind. You just leave them. No. You have to find a way to bring them up. At the end of the day, maybe there are different places, but it is the progress. I'll say that again. It is the progress and improvement that we are after. When there's progress, when there's improvement, we are moving along. You are moving along as a school. We are moving along in challenging the new you each time to do better. So when we just do a self-evaluation that's not accurate, it's actually doing the school a disservice. It's doing the school a disservice because you could actually be here, but you are just here, but you have the potential to be here. And we want to be able to help you and to support you in getting to where your true potential is, okay? We also know that at the very least, for the Office of Education Quality Assurance, self-evaluation is something to be done annually. Of course, in-house, you can do it, you should be doing it more than once so that you can constantly tweak your approach and you can make changes to ensure that by the time the self-evaluation is coming, it is most accurate of what is going on ground. Okay? Next slide.
Sorry, I was on mute. DG, I think you and I have managed to do this. We are able to provide time for Q&A.
Oh, for the mentee. Oh, Q&A, awesome.
Q&A, absolutely.
We have gotten better with time.
Time management, that is part of our own self-evaluation.
Exactly.
And I believe Mrs. Ashobo said that there were some questions in the chat. So I'm going to stop my share and turn it over to Mrs. Ashobo to run the Q&A panel for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Please, if you have any question, can you just send it to the chat? Let's go on with it. Please send your questions to the chat, please.
I noticed that there's a question here by Mr. Emmanuel Oji. Selection of schools for the pilot is good, but did it include some of the low-cost private schools so as to ensure that the minimum standard is in focus? Excellent question. So keep in mind the automation is not fully done yet. So we're piloting in phases. And we're using a mix of schools to pilot. So although we are going to have the platform, right, for those that have access to technology, that is not going to change the manual process that's existent, okay? So we know the need to maintain a manual process for some schools that do not have access to optimal technology, number one. So the way we're doing things will still remain. It will not replace that process. Number two, those that do have access, minimal access to technology, will be able to make use of the platform. There is a need to also think through a mix of the two, kind of a hybrid, right? Because we know that even, you know, as governments, everything is not automated, right? So it would be insane at this point to just throw everything, all of our manual processes with, you know, in trying to do automation. We know that, like I said earlier on, automation can only be as great as optimal manual processes. Okay, so that also means that we're working on getting better at our manual processes to serve schools more. I hope this answers that question.
You must have questions. During the self-evaluation, okay, so this is from Shodipe Michael. During the self-evaluation, how can we check the deficits in the information environment and probabilistic feedback? DG, would you like to take that, please?
Yes, I believe this is one of our evaluations. So, like I said, there are multiple ways, there are multiple types of evidences that we're going to be requiring. More than likely, if someone is submitting evidence that is false, we are going to see it in another way, right? Because we're looking at the entire process over a period of time. So for instance, if early on in the year you've submitted a maybe student's nominal roll, and you have 100 students at the beginning of the school year, then suddenly in third term, they've jumped to 500, you know? So I think in order to ensure that information is accurate, a few things in terms of the checks and balances needs to be on ground. So one is to ensure that schools are continuously submitting formal and informal data. Another thing is, if as an evaluator we're having, you know, some sort of feeling that this information may not be accurate, all we have to do is go there to do a spot check, you know, over the information that is given. Thank you.
We just had a question, I believe, from Mr. Abdul, which is, what is the time limit to conduct a CEF by the schools? How regularly do schools need to carry out a CEF? I'll jump in on that one a little bit, and then DG, you can correct anything I get wrong. I think CEF is an ongoing process for a school. Once you delegate those standards, substandards, or even elements of school performance, you would hope that and you'd want to encourage your staff members to regularly be completing or collecting evidence and thinking about, well, this is the characteristic of a good school, and that's where we want to be. How's our evidence matching up to that? But I do believe formally the CEF is submitted once per year, but DG, do correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, I will also, as Ms. Christine has moved the baton to me, I will also answer and then move my own internal expert, Mr. Wumbeowo, also. The school self-evaluation, as at the time that we're doing a whole school evaluation, right? When we inform the schools, we expect them to have done it. Okay, and it is once a year, but like we're saying, we want to move schools into doing things that are actionable. So not just doing it for the sake of, fulfilling all righteousness. We want this to be something that they are naturally, organically doing from time to time, so that they can also work on their development plan, and they can progressively get better even before we come, right? And we know even visiting a school once every 3 years, it's not optimum, right? But if there are systems in place for the schools to manage themselves on a day-to-day basis, looking through their school self-evaluation, looking at past feedback as it comes to external evaluation, looking at their development plan and all those things that improve schooling, definitely the proof will be in the pudding by the time the OEQA comes to do the whole school evaluation.
Okay, awesome, DJ. I think we are just about at time. I would just highlight that DJ was mentioning the Lagos Learns Together website. If you are on the website and you go to PD with the DJ
now, it looks like it's about 11:31 now. Miss Christine, did you want to?
Yes, I was just mentioning, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, it looks like my mic might not be working. I was just going to mention that you can find the slides on Lagos Learns Together. If you just click on PD with the DG, you can go to access all of the content here, which will change to white because that green's just not working. And that will bring you to the slides from this workshop, as well as from the previous workshop on school development planning, and we'll add the YouTube links there as well. So thanks, DG, over to you to close us out.
Okay, so thank you all for being here today. I believe it's been a really great session. We are progressively getting better. We are progressively learning from one another. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that all the work that we're doing is impacting our students, impacting our teachers, and of course, the schools as a whole. We thought it was very important that we go back to the basics, but with a twist. Okay, go back to the basics, but with the twist. We didn't just want to be lecturing as we normally do. We wanted to make sure that we're giving you minimal resources, right? So even with these PowerPoints that we're giving you, you can tailor it to the needs of your school. It's not that it's only what is here you can present to your school, or if your evaluator presents, if you're a school leader, present to your teachers. By all means, this is just a minimal resource point. You can add videos, you can add examples from what you've noticed in your schools. You can tailor it, right? So we are just providing these resources for that. Of course, you know that the federal government handbook it is what it is. That is a tool we're using, okay? So in as much as there are set standards we want you to reach, the way in which we go there can be some flexibility, right? The way in which we're able to achieve that. We want you to share your feedback with us. What is working, what is not working about this or any other experience you've had with the Office of Education Quality Assurance. Feel free to email us at info@oeqalagos.com. Also check out our resources, social media handles, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, OEQA Lagos. Be sure to access our resources on Lagos Learns Together. LagosLearnsTogether.com is a resource that we have for students, parents, school leaders, and teachers, okay? And it is a working site. So we're progressively adding information there that we think is relevant, and we're progressively getting better. We specifically have learning packs for students below tertiary that they're able to download on the website or through a Telegram bot. Late last year, early this year, we were able to print a good amount and we were able to distribute. But of course, you know, printing can be pricey. And until we get another batch, for now, it is the virtual one that we have, the online downloadable version. So without much further ado, I kept your time last session by about 20 minutes. And now it's just 5. So I'm hoping we can also get better at this to keep to time, 11:30, so you can go about your business. Please know that although all of you are here, it is going to be available on the YouTube later. So if you see that, you know, this time is not convenient for you, it's okay. It will be available on LagosLearnsTogether.com, and it will also be available on our YouTube. Okay, so I want to thank you all for coming. Okay, someone asked how we can get the recording. The recording will be on OEQA Lagos YouTube and on Lagos Learns Together. We're also going to have the actual PowerPoint session with accompanying material, so you can take this session in your own way. I'm sure it will be different from the way I am doing it, which is fine. So I want to thank you all. Thank you so much, OEQA team. All those that have been present to make this possible. Very grateful to you. Thank you to our public schools, our private schools, taking time out. I know you are so busy during this time, and we really appreciate you. Anything to move the work forward, we are here. And last but not the least, I want to thank Mrs. Nasagati of Marai Partners and co-anchoring this event. We hope you don't get tired of our faces, but if you do, maybe we'll have to get some new faces involved. That's something that we can definitely do. Maybe I'll get some of my directors to anchor some of these. So thank you so much, and God bless you all.
Thanks, everyone. Oh, my husband just showed up with cheesecake for me. It's a lucky day.
God bless you.
Thank you, everyone.
So much. Bye-bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye-bye.